Alright, so assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone, and Rabbi yahfadhku jami'an. So, inshallah, today, let's just go over some of the things that we talked about last time. We were talking about Salat al-Eid, the Eid prayer, and actually, we went in lots of details. And we went in details in regard to the whole concept of Eid prayer and the whole concept of, I guess, feast and celebration, and whether celebrating for cultural celebrations or personal celebrations or reminders such as Eid, birthday parties, and all of that, whether it's permissible or whether it's classified as a religious holiday, therefore it would be an innovation to practice or even celebrate those holidays or those, let's say, commemorations or not. So we went in details and we said that there were three different opinions between scholars. One that considers it an innovation because the Prophet ﷺ had said, قَدْ أَبْدَلَكُمُ اللَّهُ بِهِمَا خَيْرًا مِنْهُمَا, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had placed us with two holidays that are better than it, basically better than whether this is relating and responding to their celebration, or whether this would be basically inclusive to any other celebration other than the two Eids. Okay, so that was the first opinion. The second opinion basically said it was not necessarily, if we're going to be talking about holidays, commemorations, celebrations, we would look at it and see the roots of that celebration. Is the root of the celebration a religious celebration? If it's a religious celebration, then they considered this hadith to be an exclusive to basically religious celebrations, and therefore it would be haram to celebrate religious celebrations or at least the celebrations that have religious roots. Okay, so whether that was a pagan root or whether that was a Christian root, Jewish root, whatever, Hindu root, whatever religious root, and therefore that would be, according to the second opinion, that would be what this hadith would be referring to, in considering that they had defended the idea that the holiday that the Sahaba were practicing, or at least practicing at the time before knowing the ruling, was actually a religious pagan holiday. Okay, so that was their defense. We went in details also with the third opinion. Let me just elaborate more on the second opinion. The second opinion, therefore, regarded if it's not a religious root and therefore cultural, personal, just as we're talking about probably an anniversary or probably a birthday, that this is not necessarily religious. It's more of a cultural celebration or an individual commemoration, and therefore it would be similar and basically containing the same ruling as a wedding. They considered it exactly like a wedding, and therefore, as long as the regulations are there for celebrations, whether it's dressing properly or perhaps the words that are being said are within the limits and boundaries that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had regarded, or whether we're speaking about, for example, no intermingling between men and women and so forth, that it would be permissible. So that would be those would be the general regulations. So according to the second opinion, birthdays, things like anniversaries, things like, I don't know, Independence Day, that would not be included in this hadith because it's not a religious commemoration, does not have religious roots, and is more of a cultural thing. Okay, in other words, they didn't consider it as an innovation, but considered it as individual practice that is irrelevant to religion. Okay, third opinion, they basically said, well, we do consider both opinions as containing strong evidence, and we would like to avoid practicing holidays just to stay on the safe side, whether we're speaking about cultural-based holidays, or whether it's an individual-based, or whether it's a religious-based holiday. We would like to stay on the safe side and avoid all of those entirely. So that's basically the third opinion. I personally like to choose a third opinion, to be honest, as preponderant. Wallahu alam, just to stay on the safe side, even though I do consider both opinions to basically having a good strong argument, and I would like to embrace both of those strong arguments rather than be selective or at least side with one opinion over the other, because both do really have good strong arguments, to be honest. And by the way, the evidences that they depended on was not only limited to the evidence that I had mentioned, whether in the previous class or in this class. Okay. No, their evidence actually stretches a lot more than that, but just wanted to make the story at least summarized, short, rather than go in extensive details. Okay, and of course, some other evidence, من تشبه بقوم فهو منهم, whoever imitates any group of people, they would be a part of them. We went in details with that one. And of course, then we went into the evidence that Salat al-Eid was actually something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had recommended in the Quran or the Prophet ﷺ. And of course, the evidence, فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ وَانْحَرْ, so pray to your Lord and sacrifice to him. And because we said there are two types of holidays, Eid al-Adha, which basically would come after the Hajj, after a pilgrimage, and Eid al-Fitr. Eid al-Fitr would basically be after Ramadan. So it's basically going after two major forms of worship, which is the fasting and the pilgrimage. So فَصَلِّ لِرَبِّكَ, the word فَصَلِّ comes in first, pray to your Lord, and then sacrifice. So therefore, that's the evidence that the scholars that had said that we would prefer that people would make their Salat al-Eid for al-Adha prayer sooner than the Salat that they would do for Salat al-Fitr, Salat al-Eid, during Eid al-Fitr. Okay, so that was there. They said, well, the word fasalli came in first, and then that one, and then sacrifice. قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى. Yet during the Eid al-Fitr, it basically preceded the tazkiyah or the zakat, basically, as before, to engaging in commemorating or remembrance of the Lord Almighty, and then praying Salat al-Eid. Okay, so that's for Eid al-Adha, and this is for Eid al-Fitr. Okay, all right. And certainly, it was the practice that the Prophet ﷺ had taught the Sahaba. It was a practice that not only did the Sahaba practice it and the Khulafa al-Rashidin later on, but it was something that the Prophet ﷺ had also taught and even recommended that even menstruating women or women that usually don't go out, don't have a, let's call it a public business, that they would also engage in this Eid prayer, even if they may not be performing the prayer itself, but at least they would be present in making the number of the Muslims basically present, visible to the non-Muslims and also to the Muslims as well, and definitely bringing in some sort of commemoration, some sort of a celebration, some sort of union within the community, and certainly that has its impact on, of course, that feeling the security, feeling the confidence, especially in the younger generation. Sometimes to feel as a part of a bigger community, it does give them confidence. It does give them, I guess, that identity enhancement. So I would definitely, consider that as very important, especially, I would say, those that are living in the West. It's extremely important to connect your children. I mean, the ones that are living in the East and West everywhere, but especially those in the West, I would say they would need to work harder to let their children connect and find other Muslim peers, even though I do recognize, okay, just on a side, I do recognize that a lot of the Muslim peers, unfortunately, had been a horrible influence on the other Muslim children. but we would have to be selective. Not because they're Muslim doesn't mean that I would just consider that, yes, they should be al-adala, or they should be good just because they're Muslim and at least he's a friend with a Muslim person. No, you really have to be selective. Make sure that this Muslim friend is really holding on to their akhlaq, to their mannerisms, to their deen, etc., before you, I would say, rush in judging those Muslim kids, and considering them that they're actually good because their parents seem to be good parents. Want to be really careful with that one. Okay, let's see. Going out for Salat al-Eid. Let's see. So going out for Salat al-Eid, in general, we said that it was preferable to be done. Was preferred to be done in a faraway desert, or at least it doesn't have to be. Okay, let me clarify that one. It doesn't have to be a desert, okay? But that was their available. That was their available field, okay? Their available field was a desert, okay? But that doesn't mean that you would have to do it in a desert area. Whatever available field. What are we talking about? A community center? Are we talking about perhaps a park, maybe the field, maybe a football field, etc.? You could do it all. The whole object of all of this is to make an available space for the large number of people coming in, and at the same time to get the Muslims that are attending a sense of a feeling that it's not an average day. It's not an average day. It's an extraordinary day. It's something different, and therefore bringing in this feeling that something new is happening. In fact, it is the sunnah that you would take the route that is not the ordinary route, that you might actually go for this or that place, and you would also dress up. You would basically create an atmosphere, even at home, for the children, for everyone else to feel that this is an extraordinary day, that there is a sense of feeling that there is a holiday happening. So now one thing is, I'm going to talk about this. Sorry about that. Starting. Okay, here we go. One thing is, sometimes you could see, for example, when they said that it would be recommended that it would be performed in the desert. Ironically, he just said a spacious place near the town. Okay, he just said a spacious place near the town, even though the Arabic side of it, that's not what it's actually saying. I wonder if he had actually said, I mean, right. So he just said, so in the Arabi side, he was literally saying in a nearby desert. All right. But here, I guess the English translation was like, I'm not sure that that's what he really meant. So he basically put in the idea and said a spacious place near the town, as the Prophet ﷺ used to perform the two face. Okay. All right. So yeah, just wanted you to make sure that we understand both sides. Okay, let's see. I didn't actually finish everything about Salat al-Eid, so let's now continue. Salat al-Eid would start after the sunrise by basically by, it said here, the length of a spear above the horizon, which is about 20 to half an hour time. And the reason for that is because during that time, so when the sun rises during that time, okay, right after the sunrise, okay, for 20 to half an hour timing, that would be makruh or a haram timing to pray in, unless there was a necessity. So the Prophet ﷺ would wait for Salat al-Eid in order to pray it for about that time. Once that time basically passes, the makruh time basically passes. What if the person didn't know that that it was Salat al-Eid. We talked about that. And they basically had missed Salat al-Eid. We talked about that one. So it can be made up. It can be made up the second day. Does it have to be made up at that timing, basically after that timing, or can we make it up during Isha time? Make it up during that timing. That's the preferred timing for it. So make it up during that time. Okay. What about Salat al-Duha? Salat al-Duha, and should we pray Salat al-Duha if we wanted to pray Salat? Wait a minute. So what is Salat al-Duha again? So Salat al-Duha is basically prayed by twos, okay? And it would be a voluntary prayer that you would pray. We talked about it before. I'm just going to remind you of it. Voluntary prayer that is prayed by two, and it is between the window, not window, an actual window, but between the timing, that is. When the sun rises, like a spear, the size of a spear above the horizon, okay? And that's 20 minutes after sunrise, 20 to half an hour timing. And then it would last until the sun is basically in the meridian. So how do I know that? You would basically look out. If you don't see any shadow to the things that surround you, that would actually mean that the sun is actually in the middle of the sky. Okay, so that's about approximately 40 minutes prior dhuhr. Okay, so 40 minutes prior dhuhr, that's when your duha timing is basically finished. It's done. Okay, so duha is prayed by two. You can pray it up to 8 rak'ahs, or you can pray it up to 12, according to some scholars. Okay, let's see. We talked about it before, so let's go. Let's continue right there. You can pray Salat al-Duha and actually delay Salat al-Fitr. Okay, what's the evidence? That Amr ibn Hazm, he had narrated أن عجل الأضحى وأخر الفطر وذكر الناس. Amr ibn, let's look at that hadith right there so you could actually see it. Okay, that he basically had narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said, perform, okay, where's that hadith? Okay, here we go. Perform the prayer of the day of sacrifice early. Ajil al-Adha. Okay, so when you say perform it early, does that mean before the early designated time? No, it doesn't mean before the designated time of it, but it just means that you pray it. If we're going to pray Salat al-Eid, for example, if let's say the horizon is basically showing that the sun is right now beyond that timing that is makruh by half an hour, okay? And then in that situation, let's say that happened at 7:30, then at 7:45, we'll probably pray Salat al-Eid. Okay, does it have to be sharp, like 7:45 sharp? No, it doesn't have to be sharp. It can be 8, it can be 9, it can be 10, as long as you're not going up to Salat al-Duhur timing. Okay, that's basically permissible. Okay, so why do they even make it at like 8 a.m. or 8:30 a.m.? Why not make it when everyone else is comfortable and, had a good night's sleep and all of that, and wake up at probably 10 a.m. or something like that and go for Salat al-Eid at 11? Because that's the sunnah. The sunnah is to pray it early, at least for Salat al-Eid during al-Adha. During Eid al-Adha, it's the sunnah to pray it as early as possible. Versus Eid al-Fitr, the sunnah is to delay it. Not delay it till it gets near Dhuhr, but to delay it a little bit further. Okay? A little bit further. Why? So for Eid al-Adha, it's so the people can pray Salat al-Eid and actually go and have enough time to slaughter the animal, sacrifice basically, and distribute it and do all the job that is needed for it. because it does take time to slaughter, to basically slice it up and chop it, give it some time. Well, before you even slice it up and chop it, you have to let that blood drain. Okay, you're gonna have to let that blood drain for some while. Once the blood is basically not strong, and it's not gushing anymore, that's when you need to basically remove the skin and then remove all the guts and all of that, and then slice it and then give it some time. You also don't want to cook it right away. No, you need to let that also drain again from the blood that's on there for another 4 to 5 hours, to just let that drain, or else the meat is going to be blue because of the blood that is within that meat. So even after chopping it, you're gonna have to, just spread it out and just let it dry on maybe some paper towels or anything like that, or even sheets, and just give it some time, 4 to 5 hours, to kind of drain that blood right there. So that would take time. And of course, then you're going to pretty much distribute that udhiyah, that meat, into different portions. The portions are going to be 1/3 for you, for yourself, 1/3 for the poor, and 1/3 basically for the family. Okay. And then, of course, if it's 1/3 for the family, here's one for an amount for my brother, an amount for my sister, an amount for this, and basically, yeah, you would get a small amount. Okay. Certainly, even if you were to cook that udhiyah meat, it's not my preferred one. Remember, I grew up on a range, so it's not my preferred one, because it's you could put it in the pressure cooker, and it may actually need an hour till it really cooks really well, compared to the younger ones that you might slaughter that might only just need half an hour in the pressure cooker. But this one might actually need an hour, because the sacrifice has to be within a certain age limit. It has to have completed a certain age limit in order for it to qualify for sacrifice. Okay. All right, let's continue right there. Let's see. The sunnah for Eid al-Fitr is that we would actually eat dates before going for Eid al-Fitr. So we would basically do a breakfast type of thing. And in that breakfast, we're basically going to be eating some dates. Okay. And let's say the Prophet ﷺ, according to the hadith, Buraidah, what did he say? He said, كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا يخرج يوم الفطر حتى يفطر ولا يطعم يوم النحر حتى يصلي. That the Prophet ﷺ used to go out for the prayer on the day of fast breaking before eating. Wait. Did not go out. Read that wrong. Wait a minute. That's not true. Okay. Yeah. They did not go out before eating. In other words, you would have a breakfast first. And he used to not eat on the day of sacrifice before performing the prayer. Okay. I think this is where we left off at. Am I right? Yes. Let's see. The sunnah is, let's see, in addition, it is the sunnah act to go out early in the morning when proceeding to perform the feast prayer. So this is what we had said earlier. And another sunnah is that the person would actually dress their favorite clothes. They would basically dress up in their best garments, right? And let's see right there. Moreover, it's an act of sunnah to pray looking nice and wearing one's best clothes. Okay. What was the evidence on that? That the Prophet ﷺ, there was a specific jibba, it was a loose outer garment that the Prophet ﷺ used to wear, and he used to wear it on 2 feasts and on Fridays. So he didn't really have a lot of clothes, did he? There you go. He just didn't have a lot of clothes. It was basically something that was a special garment that was considered, I guess, designated for those two important days. Same thing with Umar ibn Khattab. He would wear his best garments on the day of Eid. Okay, let's see, look at this one. It said, رواه البيهقي بإسناد جيد. Did he actually say that in the English translation? Let's say he did. He said, Ibn Umar, or that was Ibn Umar, not Umar ibn Khattab, used to wear his best clothes on the two feasts. And he said, as related by al-Bayhaqi, with a good chain of net transmitters. I think that was a good translation right there. What does it mean, a good chain of transmitters? Remember, the hadith basically contains two things. The hadith itself, the quote, the actual quote, and then you've got the chain of narration. What about the chain of narration? The chain of narration basically tells us all the number of people that basically passed down this hadith all the way to the Prophet ﷺ. Okay? All the way to the Prophet ﷺ. But wait a minute. This isn't a hadith to the Prophet ﷺ. This is Ibn Umar's preference, not the Prophet ﷺ. So this is why this would not be called a hadith. This would be called an athar. Al-athar is a narration that basically is going back to the Prophet, to the Sahaba. A hadith is basically a quote that goes back to the Prophet, okay, to the Prophet, and not to the Sahaba. Okay, so if a companion narrated a narration that goes back to the Prophet, so there are two kinds. There's one that we could really see that goes back to the Prophet. It's right there. He's saying the Prophet said, he had done, he had nodded his head or whatever it is. Okay, that's a hadith. Okay, but there is something called hadith marfu'a. Okay, and what is that? That's basically that area that we would know that this companion, although he didn't literally say that he had taken the information from the Prophet ﷺ, so he'd say the Prophet ﷺ said, or etc., but we would know that this information would basically go back and trace back to the Prophet ﷺ, even though he didn't say the actual quote and where it was coming from. So, for example, like when we say كان يلبس في العيدين أحسن ثيابه, that he was wearing the best of his garments on Eid day. Okay, so would this act as a marfu'? No, but we would know that this information or this practice was basically taught by the Prophet ﷺ, so it would basically mimic the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, let's say it is part of the conditions basically for the Eid prayer, that it would be basically done by the residents. In other words, we're not talking about nomads here. Okay, we're talking about residents, people that are living within this area, within this neighborhood. And what if it's someone that is basically traveling and they happen to be on a journey? Should they not join them? They can join them, but it's not obligatory on a person that is on a journey. Okay. What about Salat al-Eid? We said that there are two khutbahs basically before Salat, basically after Salat al-Eid, if we're talking about Salat al-Eid. But it would be two khutbahs before Salat on Friday prayer. So on Friday prayer, it would be the khutbah, the two khutbahs, the sermons would basically be before the Salah that's on Friday. But during Eid, it's the opposite. The two khutbahs are after the Salah. Okay, let's say And that's basically the practice that Abu Bakr, Umar ibn Khattab, Uthman bin Affan, they would also continue mimicking the Prophet ﷺ. So now he said, استفاضت السنة بذلك وعليه عامة أهل العلم. He said that that's basically as the issue that was the practice basically performed by the Sahaba, basically by the Prophet ﷺ, and it basically became this act that most of the men of knowledge basically had viewed and had done as well. Okay, so what's the whole wisdom behind this? Why are we delaying the khutbah for Salat al-Eid, but for Jumu'ah prayer, we're actually making the khutbah precede the prayer? Okay. So what's the wisdom behind it? Okay. So it's the wisdom, number one, when we say the wisdom, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have the ability to change it in order to make something probably come with the same wisdom. Let's just say some people said, the people are not comfortable with praying Salat al-Eid first and then hearing the khutbah, because hearing the khutbah, it becomes noisy, the children, the women, and they're not really focused on it. Can we make Salat, the khutbah, earlier? That way, they could just pray and just leave, but then it would give them a window to come and not miss out the khutbah. We would say we cannot do that, because this is not the practice that the Prophet ﷺ had done. There was an attempt by some khulafat to do that, but then the scholars stood against them and said that you cannot change the practice that the Prophet ﷺ had practiced and the Sahaba basically mimicked, and to do that is an innovation. It's an innovation because that's not what the Prophet ﷺ had done. All right, so what is the evidence? Or at least what's the wisdom, not the evidence, but what's the wisdom? So Salat al-Jumu'ah, the Eid, khutbah al-Jumu'ah, sorry, is basically part of Salat al-Jumu'ah. It's part of it. But for al-Eid, the Eid prayer, that's the target. The khutbah is the sunnah that basically that is less of its importance than the salah itself. Okay, than the salah itself. So that doesn't mean, let's say the person prayed Salat al-Eid, but they didn't hear the khutbah. Their salah would be accepted. But let's say a person heard the khutbah but didn't pray Salat al-Jumu'ah. Nope, it wouldn't be accepted. What about if a person didn't hear khutbah al-Jumu'ah but prayed Salat al-Jumu'ah? Differences of opinions between scholars on whether it is accepted or not. You see what I'm saying? Differences of opinions. All right? Salat al-Eid is 2 rak'ahs. That was unanimously agreed upon between scholars. All right? And the narration, there's one of them, that Ibn Abbas had said that the Prophet ﷺ had prayed صلى يوم الفطر ركعتين لم يصلي قبلهما ولا بعدهما. That the Prophet ﷺ had performed the 2 rak'ahs, that is 2 units of prayer, on the day of fast breaking, and he did not perform prayer before or after them. That is to basically tell us that it was exclusive to Salat al-Jumu'ah. There was nothing before and nothing after it. Umar ibn al-Khattab had narrated that Salatul Fitri wal Adha rak'atan tamamun غير قصر على لسان نبيكم وقد خاب من افترى. Said the prayer of the fast breaking feast and that of the feast of sacrifice are to be performed in 2 rak'ahs without shortening. In other words, it's not that it was initially 4 and then it was made into 2. He said, no, that's actually the complete amount. The 2 rak'ahs are the complete amount. It was not shortened in any way. That's what he wanted to basically say. And he said, then that's said by the tongue of the Prophet ﷺ. In other words, something that he had done and something that he had also instructed verbally. And he has failed who invents falsehood. So basically telling us, well, anybody would bring about an innovation and actually make a new, whether it's a new addition or whether it's a new change onto the practice that the Prophet ﷺ had instructed, that would be considered an innovation. Okay, Salat al-Eid, there's no adhan and no iqamah during Salat al-Eid, no adhan. So how are people going to know? Well, we could announce the timing. We could pass out flyers. We could let them know on social media that that's when our Eid prayer is going to be performed at. And certainly there's no adhan nor iqama. And it would be best if the imam would basically give directions to how the prayer is going to be performed. Okay, whether it's on the microphone, say this number of takbirat, this is how we're going to do it, whether it's on the microphone or whether it's passing out flyers to basically demonstrate, or perhaps put it on social media and let people know. Perhaps, I like those masajid that relate with the people that attend that masjid. And I would say like on social media where people can communicate with the administration with that masjid, let's say on their Facebook or perhaps on their YouTube or whatever it is. And that way you could make that communion, you can make that community basically on social media, and people can relate and discuss, and all of that basically available for the attendees. Okay, it is not permissible to actually do adhan or iqamah. Okay, let's say, why isn't it permissible? Like, is it haram? The answer is yes, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man ahdatha fi amrina hadha ma laysa minhu fahuwa rad." Whoever innovates anything in our matter, in the matter of the faith, basically, okay, then it would be rejected. It would be rejected. It would be returned. It wouldn't be something that is accepted, basically. Wouldn't be accepted. And let's say, Jabir ibn Abdullah, he said, and you could see this hadith is actually narrated by Sahih Muslim. Okay, what did he say? He said, صليت مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم العيد غير مرة ولا مرتين فبدأ بالصلاة قبل الخطبة بغير أذان ولا إقامة. Okay, with no adhan or iqamah. I performed the feast prayer along, that is Jabir ibn Abdullah saying, I performed the feast prayer along with the Prophet ﷺ's, along with Allah's Messenger several times, and he performed the prayer before delivering the sermon without pronouncing adhan or iqamah. Okay, so how is it done anyways? Okay, when performing Salat al-Eid in the first rak'ah, okay, you would basically start with Takbirat al-Ihram. Allahu Akbar. Okay, and then you could do dua al-istiftah. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdik wa tabarak asmuk wa ta'ala jadduk wa la ilaha ghayruk. That's dua al-istiftah. I don't know how to say it. It's a sunnah anyways. You don't have to. It's a sunnah anyways. Can you say it again? Sure. Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik wa tabarak asmuk wa ta'ala jadduk wa la ilaha ghayruk. Can you write it for me? Sure. Dua al-istiftah. We're going to write it for you. Dua al-istiftah. And there are different ways to actually say dua al-istiftah, by the way. Okay? Is it one way? And maybe we could do it that way. Here we go. Okay? That's right. There we go. Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdik wa tabarak asmuk wa ta'ala jadduk wa la ilaha ghayruk. So what does it mean? There's none like unto the Lord Almighty, and none and no praise as compared to the praise that the Lord Almighty deserves. Your name is most high and most blessed, and your power is most high, and there's no Lord other than you, and no deity other than you. That's basically what it means. Okay. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك وتبارك اسمك وتعالى جدك ولا إله غيرك. And certainly that's a sunnah to say, but if you don't know it, that's okay. So when do we say this again? We say it right after you do the first Allahu Akbar. That's when you say it, right after it. Okay. And can I hold a paper and read off that paper, or maybe hold my phone and read off my phone? You certainly can. You can hold on your phone and read off your phone. Okay, let's see. And then أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم, and you would basically do a couple takbirat. Okay, let's actually get a video so we could actually see this, right? Let's do that so we could see what that would look like. And we're going to put in a video so everyone else can see it. And let's do that, okay? I'm going to do that.
Dr. Aisha, sorry, while you bring up the video, I just have a quick question
Go ahead.
regarding last class. So you
Sure.
mentioned that after Eid is when we do the Qurbani. But for me this year, I had to pay someone to do the Qurbani for me back in my home country. And I'm praying Eid in Canada. So they already finished praying. They already finished praying Eid and slaughtering the Qurbani before it was even time for Eid here in Canada. So in that situation, do I still need to do another Qurbani after I finished my own prayers, or is it valid already?
Right. So as long as you basically had given the permission for someone else to do it, so you don't have to say, hey, I've done my Salat al-Eid, you could do it now. All right. If they're going to do it on your behalf and do it based on their timing, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to, correspond with them and say, hey, I've done it I'm finished with Salat al-Eid. Okay, now you could do it. You understand what I'm saying? As long as you had designated, let's say, an amount of, let's say, money for them to do that udhiyah, they can do it based on their own timing, not necessarily based on your timing. You understand what I'm saying?
That is very clear. Thank you.
Yeah, because, this is all new. It's not that we could, they were capable of corresponding. So this is ijtihad. This is ijtihad. And with ijtihad, of course, because, hey, we're capable of corresponding and communicating with the people and basically do that. Okay. Does that necessarily mean that that's what we're supposed to be doing? And basically, be in that intricate, intricate relationship and telling them, hey, I prayed Salat al-Eid, now you could do it. And if they basically had done it before, because if you're in Canada, then their Eid basically is before your Eid. Okay. So are you going to be waiting for the second day? Are they going to be waiting at least for the second day till you perform your Eid? No, let them do their sacrifice based on their timing. Okay. So we're talking about between you and them, we're talking almost 10-hour difference, and depending on the area, but 8-hour difference, 10-hour difference. Okay. That's a lot of time. So let them do the sacrifice. Let them do the sacrifice based on their timing, and your Eid would still, inshallah, would still be accepted. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to let you see the video, and I chose, out of all of them, I chose this video right there. So takbirat al-ihram, that's the first takbirah is basically the takbirat al-ihram, which is the first Allahu Akbar. Okay. And then certainly, and basically do dua al-istiftah, the dua that we just did earlier. Subhanak Allahumma bihamdik wa tabarak ismuk wa ta'ala jadduk wa la ilaha ghayrak. Now, of course, when you do that dhikr, okay, that dhikr, which is, you're going to now be doing 6. Now, here's one thing. You're going to be doing, other than takbirat al-ihram, you're going to be doing 6 takbirat. Let's look at those takbirat and what we actually say. Okay, so you're going to be doing, according to this hadith, okay, here we go. You're basically going to be doing 6 takbirat, and then other than takbirat, that first takbirah, okay, then you're going to do dua al-istiftah, And then you're basically going to be saying the six different takbirat right there, like we said. Okay. And then you're going to be reading after. Okay. Now here's one thing. What you're going to be doing in the takbirah, you're going to say Allahu Akbar kabira, walhamdulillahi kathira, wa subhanallahi bukratan wa asila, wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin النبي على محمد النبي وآله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Well, there are actually different ways to make that takbir. Okay, so the first basically, so there's also Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar. Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar. So that's basically Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar. Can I also add wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad? You can. So there are different types of takbirat. Okay, just to keep us just aware of that, and it doesn't have to be in one exact wording. Okay, let's continue. So of course, the takbirat are done before the Fatiha. Before the Fatiha. So here it is, Allahu Akbar, and then Allahu Akbar, Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar, Allahu Akbar. And with every single time you do it, you would basically raise your hands. Raise your hands just like this guy is raising the hands at that way. There you go. You would raise with it. So that would be 6 times. How am I going to count? You can count with your own fingers. With your own fingers, you know, every time you would make a takbirah, you would basically pin it down. Okay. And of course, here we go. Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar. And he's counting Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu akbar. Basically did it 6 times. And of course, then basically, okay, he was basically doing it too fast, and because he didn't show that he had done, I'm going to choose a different video. That guy, let's go with this one. Okay, we're going to go with this one. Okay, here we go. We're going to try to get this one. You see how he's doing it? You know, basically pinning down his fingers right there. And certainly, of course, after finishing the takbirat, then the person is going to be reading, the imam is going to be reading Surah al-Fatiha and another surah. Now, the other surahs, there were a number of different narrations. Which surahs are those that the Prophet ﷺ had recited? If the person did not recite those surahs and probably recited Qul Huwallahu Ahad, that would still pass. Okay. So then after finishing the takbirat, then they would read the Fatiha, and then basically another surah, maybe Sabbih Isma Rabbika al-A'la, and then do the ruku', and then do the sujood. Let's see how he can do it. Okay, you know what? I'm going to do someone else. Let me choose this guy. I think he's good. Let's go faster. Okay, here we go. There we go. There we go. Basically, Allahu Akbar. Doing that takbiras a couple times. And then, of course, Fatiha, etc. And then after reading Fatiha, after reading another surah, then Allahu Akbar. And then you're going to go for ruku'. Okay. After going for ruku', you're going to go for sujood. And basically, after going for the ruku' or going for the sujood, that's considered as one side. What are you going to do? You're going to do 1 rak'ahs and basically 2 sajdas. Okay. And that's basically how we would perform Salat al-Eid. Salat al-Eid would be 2 rak'ahs. So that was one that he had done. Then in the second rak'ah, by the way, what are we going to do in the second rak'ah? We're going to do the same exact thing, but instead of 6 takbirat, we're actually going to be doing 5 this time. Now we're going to be doing 5. Okay, so what are we going to do? For the second rak'ah, we're going to be reading basically the 5 takbirat. Okay, and that is not including the takbirat that I basically had done for standing. Okay. So when you stand basically for the second rak'ah, you're going to say Allahu Akbar, right? There you go. So you're not going to include that in the numbers of takbirat that you're going to be doing. Now we're going to do 5 takbirat. So Allahu Akbar for the official standing, then Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. My hands are going to be stretched out just like we saw in that video. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah walhamdulillah wa la ilaha illallah wallahu Akbar. You're going to do it 5 times, okay? 5 times. And then of course, in those 5 times, once you are finished, then you're going to read al-Fatiha. You're going to read Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. You're going to be reading al-Fatiha. And once you finish al-Fatiha, you can read basically any surah. And we're going to talk about which ayat, or at least which surahs that the Prophet ﷺ had recited. But just to let you know, you can read Qul Huwallahu Ahad if that's what you know. You can read Qul A'udhu Birabbin Nas if that's what you know. All right. Or you can basically want to practice the sunnah and actually read Surah Al-Ghashiyah. Okay. Or read Surah Al-Ghashiyah. Let's see right there. So at least the takbirat, we just recited those ayat, then Allahu Akbar. Now we're going to go for ar-ruku', and then Allahu Akbar, go for 2 sujuds, and basically do exactly the same way that we would perform our salah normally, doing at-tahiyyatullah, salawatul tayyibat, and also Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, etc. Okay. And then assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So that's basically it. So the first rak'ah preceding the recitation, we're going to do 7 in total. Okay, takbirat. I would be doing it 7. And in the second one, basically 5. Okay, now here's one thing, just to let you know. Okay, just on a side. There is a different Salat Eid for the Hanafi madhab. The Hanafis actually pray it differently. They have 5 takbirat, and in the second rak'ah 3. And plus, they do their takbirat after reciting the Quran. Okay, so it would be done before making the ruku'ah. Okay, so the Hanafis pray it slightly different, but then whether this way or that way, at the end, it's a considerable one. But what is preponderant, wallahu a'lam, is this way and not the Hanafis. Sorry, Hanafis. I know you outnumber all of us, but yeah. Okay, let's say. That's why he said, روي غير ذلك في عدد التكبيرات. He said that there were a number of different narrations on the number of takbirat. Is it 7? Is it 6? Is it including takbirat al-ihram? Is it not including it? What exactly? So you could say, of course, you're going to have differences of opinions. You know, especially they didn't have microphones there, you know, and they were using their own observation to count and all of that. So certainly you might have differences of opinions on the numbers, but at least we would know. Okay, let's see. And it is a sunnah to say between the takbiras, Allahu Akbar kabira, walhamdulillah kathira, wa subhanallah bukratan wa asila, wa sallahu ala Muhammadin Nabi wa alihi wa sallam tasliman kathira. Let's see how we translated it, right? Let's look at the translation and see. Allah is truly great, and praise be to Allah in abundance, and glory be to Allah in the morning and the evening. And may Allah confer the blessings upon the Prophet and upon his household greatly. Okay. So that definitely is a great translation. Allah is truly great. Okay, and praise be to Allah in abundance. Alhamdulillah kathira. And subhanallah bukratan wa asila. And subhanallah, and the glory be to Allah in the morning and the evening. Agree. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin Nabi wa alihi wa sallam taslima. And may Allah confer blessings. is it blessings or is it forgiveness? Because Salatullah is forgiveness, but the Malaika would be the ones to so yeah. So may Allah confer the blessings upon the Prophet, or is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would forgive the Prophet and the Malaika would be the ones to ask and make that prayer for the Prophet? Okay, and his household. All right, let's continue right there. So, by the way, there are so many narrations on those types of dhikrs. We did actually talk about it in Hisn Muslim. Wait a minute, whatever happened to Hisn Muslim? We didn't complete that. We're going to get back to it, inshallah. Okay. And أتى بذكر من أتى بذكر غير هذا فلا بأس لأنه ليس فيه ذكر معين. Okay, what did he want to say? This is important. He said, and whoever brings another type of dhikr, as long as it's within this area, within this category, then that would be permissible because there isn't a specific dhikr that was actually done. Can I do this in English? If you don't know how to do it in Arabic, but you just know how to say Allahu Akbar, do that. Can you say it in English? Can you do the dhikr in English? Preferably not, okay? And it's preferred that you would only do it in the language that the Prophet ﷺ had done it in, okay? And because some scholars also said that if you were, it doesn't have to be Arabic, but let's just say I'm speaking Arabic, but my own terms, okay? My own terms, or I'm probably using my Palestinian dialect. That would nullify the prayer according to the scholars. It would nullify the prayer, regardless of the language. Okay? Some scholars actually said it would nullify the prayer. Other scholars said if the dhikr, like the takbirat, okay, that if that takbirat basically contains the praise to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so basically the idea that it would be permissible. But even the Hanafis that said that, they basically had later, they went back on this opinion. So therefore, you could see that even the scholars that had mentioned this opinion, they later rejected that opinion. So therefore, that doesn't actually stand on strong evidence at all. Okay, Ibn al-Qayyim, he also had mentioned, let's see, who's Ibn al-Qayyim again? Oh, Ibn al-Qayyim is basically that scholar, originally from Nablus, okay, and then later on moved to Syria. He said, كان يسكت بين كل تكبيرتين سكتة يسيرة ولم يحفظ عنه ذكر معين بين التكبيرات. That the Prophet ﷺ used to keep silent for a little while between every two takbiras. There's no specific invocation related from him to be uttered between the two takbiras. Okay. And what if the person had actually, miscalculated, just forgot the exact numbers? Then in that situation, you're going to assume based on the less number. And you're going to assume a less number. And then then you would basically consider that the less number is what you're going to consider as right. And then you're going to base on that. All right. If the person had forgotten to basically do the takbirat and they just did like the random 2 rak'ahs, the prayer is valid because doing the extra takbirat is a sunnah. So even if a person prayed the 2 Eid prayers like any other 2 rak'ahs, like Fajr prayer, that would still be valid because doing the takbirat is a sunnah. Okay, if the person had forgotten these takbirat, that was a sunnah anyways. You can do sujood as-sahw at the end. what if the person was not capable, didn't, just joining along with Salat al-Eid, and they only came late, and while the imam was probably doing the second rak'ah, okay? So what happens then? So they basically don't worry about the takbirat. Just basically join along. And anyways, the takbirat are a sunnah and not mandatory. Okay? And certainly the imam for Salat al-Eid, they would read out loud. And in fact, what does that mean, reading out loud? So it would be usually in congregation. Can I pray it alone if I wasn't capable of getting a time off from work to join Salat al-Eid? You sure can. You can pray it on your own. But the sunnah is to pray it in congregation with the rest of the community. That's the sunnah. But if you weren't able to, and you couldn't pray Salat al-Eid in that congregation, then you certainly can pray it on your own. Do I have to make it out loud, like really loud? No, because the whole object of reading out loud is to let the other people hear the prayer, In other words, hear the recitation. But if the other people are not there, then there's no sense to making it loud when no one else is hearing it but you. The whole object is not to make it loud. The whole object is to make it audible for the people that are joining along to basically hear it, whether it's a man or a woman, okay? And this is important, whether it's a man or a woman. Now, all the different scholars had unanimously agreed, okay, that it would be as loud. We're speaking about loud in order to basically have other people hear it. Okay, let's see. In the first rak'ah, I want you to look at this one because there are different opinions. In the first rak'ah, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go like this. The first rak'ah, we do have different narrations. The first rak'ah, Sabbih isma rabbika al-a'la, which is Surah al-A'la. In the second rak'ah, basically recite al-Fatiha, and then هل أتاك حديث الغاشية, basically Surah al-Ghashiyah. Okay, Surah al-Ghashiyah. Let's see. In other narrations, they had said that the Prophet ﷺ was reading al-Fatiha and then Surah Qaf. In fact, Salama had said, I memorized Surah Qaf by listening to the Prophet ﷺ actually read it. Just imagine. And in the second rak'ah, basically read اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر, basically Surah al-Qamar. Okay, so in other words, you got another narration that was saying it was Surah Qaf and Surah al-Qamar. Surah al-Qaf in the first rak'ah, well, I mean, it's al-Fatiha and Surah Qaf. And in the second rak'ah, it's al-Fatiha and Surah al-Qamar. Okay, and certainly Ibn Taymiyyah had basically said it would be permissible to read any recitation that would be permissible to basically read in. So even if you read Qul Huwallahu Ahad, that's absolutely fine. Okay. All right. If the person, let me just make sure. If the imam basically finishes and does the taslim and finishes and is right now doing the khutbah, okay, the two khutbahs, the imam would sit in between them. The imam would sit in between the two khutbahs. What's the evidence? That he basically said a sunnah, that is Ubaydullah ibn Utbah, okay? He said, السنة أن يخطب الإمام في العيدين خطبتين يفصل بينهما بجلوس. That the sunnah, the prophetic tradition is that the imam would basically do two khutbahs, and the two khutbahs, they would be like a short moment of sitting in between, well, sitting on a chair, okay? They would sit and kind of pause and to basically announce that khutbah number 1 had ended, take a rest, take a couple seconds or maybe a minute sitting down, and then get up and continue the second one, okay? And that's the same thing for Salat al-Jumu'ah as well. All right. Salat in Sahih that the Prophet ﷺ بدأ بالصلاة قبل الخطبة ثم قام متوكئا على بلال فأمر بتقوى الله وحث على طاعته. Let's see, what is that saying? That in this hadith, that is basically an authentic hadith, that the Prophet ﷺ had started salah before making al-khutbah. Then he stood, basically leaning on Bilal ibn Rabah, okay? And then he ordered the attendees to basically have religious integrity and obedience to the Lord Almighty, okay? And then certainly would be facing the people for the khutbah and would be facing the people even when he would be sitting down. Okay, let's continue right there. And certainly the things to say during al-khutbah. During the khutbah for Salat Eid al-Fitr, Eid al-Adha, sorry, La ilaha illallah. Eid Salat al-Eid for Eid al-Fitr. Okay, Salat al-Eid for Eid al-Fitr. Okay, it is the sunnah to remind people to basically not forget to perform sadaqat al-fitr, to give the time sadaqat al-fitr. Why? Because you're supposed to give zakat al-fitr, that charity that you're supposed to be giving for basically the end of for the end of Ramadan. That would basically be given before is-salah. It is impermissible to delay giving zakat al-fitr after you finish salah. You have to do it before even doing salat al-Eid. It has to be before salat al-Eid. Okay? So what about if I were to, just like that sister, she was saying she was in Canada, and then would probably give the donation to the people in the other country, maybe the Horn of Africa, okay? And I really recommend for those that would like to donate, I really trust araha.org, ARAHA.org. Maybe I could show it to you. For those that are living in the West, I know the people personally, and I know very well that they do an outstanding job. This is basically the website. And you could donate, and they really distribute the money to the people. I really trust this website. My udhiyah, I always give it to them. I always basically, whether it's a kafara or anything, basically just donate it to them. I really trust this website, and they do an outstanding job. And I know the people that are basically working in there, and I know that they really take their work seriously. Unfortunately, most organizations, they actually give a small amount of those donations basically to those areas, and you would see a lot of the money that is donated goes to that nonprofit organization, but most of it, maybe 60% of it, goes to the workers. Goes to the workers, goes to marketing, goes to all of that, which is a problem. If that makes it like we're really just paying these people to work, and just a fraction goes to the people that are poor people. Definitely, that's not what I would intend with my donation. I would want the donation, at least most of it, to go to the people that are in need for it, not to make more and more workers. I mean, I'm happy that they're employed, but I want that donation to be a donation and not just creating more jobs. Okay. All right. And certainly for khutbah al-Eid al-Adha, the sunnah is to remind people of the importance of udhiyah, the importance of sacrifice, and certainly speak about some of the rulings that relate to Eid the sacrifice itself. Okay. And certainly this is something that the people later on, the imams, basically just remind people of that, and remind people of the different rulings that relate to the object of why we fasted, why we were doing Hajj, the whole object of teaching the Muslim community the importance of that Eid, of that ritual, of that practice, that training that we were doing, whether during Ramadan or whether during Hajj. And certainly for women, attending and giving, basically, and encouraging women to give sadaqah is also something that the Prophet ﷺ had done. In fact, this was quite interesting, that Bilal ibn Rabah had mentioned that that's pretty much the only hadith that we have that talks about the types of jewelry that women were wearing. Okay. And Bilal ibn Rabah was mentioning that the Prophet ﷺ had one time told the women to donate because he had seen most of the dwellers in hellfire are women. So one woman said, what is it that we do wrong? And he said, تُكْثِرْنَا اللَّعْنَ وَتَكْفُرْنَا الْعَشِيرَ. تُكْثِرْنَا اللَّعْنَ, you engage in damning everything around you, cursing everything, complaining about everything. وَتَكْفُرْنَا الْعَشِيرَ, and you would deny the good that your husbands, your fathers, your relatives, or anybody would do and contribute in your life. So that's تَكْفُرْنَا الْعَشِيرَ. And this is very common. Okay. So the Prophet ﷺ was saying that that's the main reason. So he was encouraging them to donate in order to protect themselves from the torments of hellfire. So Bilal ibn Rabah was carrying this it's like a rag, and he would basically, stretch out his arms and he would carry it. Okay, probably, I don't know, tuck it in his clothes or something. And then the women would just throw their earrings, their toe rings. Yes, they were toe rings. Would throw their bracelets basically in that rag. And Bilal ibn Rabah was saying, well, this is what I saw them doing. They were throwing their toe rings, their earrings, their bracelets, their necklaces basically in there. So that's the type of jewelry that they were wearing. But the most important thing is for us to basically know that the Prophet ﷺ was ordering us to do this sadaqah, and encouraging women to also give up a lot on the jewelry, the different things, and basically let them connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From the rulings for Salat al-Eid, that it is that it's basically hated that anybody would do a nafila, like a volunteer prayer, whether before it or after it, until they would leave al-musalla, until they would leave that space. So that's why that Ibn Abbas in the hadith, he basically said that the Prophet ﷺ, he prayed Salat al-Eid 2 rak'ahs, and he did not pray anything before it or anything after them. You could see that this hadith was narrated by Bukhari and Muslim. Okay, narrated by Bukhari and Muslim, making it an authentic hadith that the Prophet ﷺ didn't pray anything before it or after them. Okay, and I guess, just recognize a couple sunnahs right there, so that we could learn from it. And the Prophet ﷺ, of course, if you were to go back home and you wanted to probably pray Salat al-Duha, that would be permissible. That the Prophet ﷺ, in fact, in this narration, that the Prophet ﷺ, when he would go back home from Salat al-Eid, he would pray 2 rak'ahs at home. Okay, what if I missed out on it? So in that situation, if a person missed Salat al-Eid, they can actually make it up. They can make up Salat al-Eid, and the way that they would do it is basically the same way that they were doing, we were doing Salat al-Eid with the takbirat. So exactly the same way. Not just two plain rak'ahs, but they could also put in and include the two different sets. Well, not two different sets, but the 7 takbirat and then the 5 takbirat. Okay, and the Prophet ﷺ said, فَمَا أَدْرَكْتُمْ فِيهِ فَصَلُّوا وَمَا فَاتَكُمْ فَأَتِمُّوا. Whatever you had managed to basically join along with the imam, then complete and basically join along with them and then complete the rest later. Okay, and certainly if they only managed to pray 1 rak'ah, then they would make up the other units basically after the imam says assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. If the sunnah, if they come in and the imam is already starting with the khutbah, just sit down and just pay attention and just listen, okay? And certainly the person can make it up individually or can make it up with the group, okay? And it's not necessarily exclusive to a particular timing. So can I pray, okay? So Salat al-Eid, all right? It doesn't have to be at this particular timing. Okay, and therefore we talked about that window. Okay, so for a woman, for the woman, do we do the takbirat in a loud voice? Do we do that? No, they would lower their voices, and this is important to keep in mind, that a woman, even though you're doing dhikr, don't raise your voice, even if you're doing dhikr. Ladies, just keep that one in mind. Okay. Even if you're doing dhikr. So even if you wanted to, probably, I don't know, only if there was a necessity. But ladies, even at home, avoid yelling. Don't yell too much, because the second that you continuously yell, later on, your screams would then become not heard, because it becomes white noise even for those that are hearing it, because they had gotten so used to hearing that. Okay, let's see. The sunnah, وَلِتُكْمِلُوا الْعِدَّةَ وَلِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ. Okay, so the sunnah is to basically do takbirat, and not necessarily exclusive to a certain timing. We're speaking about just doing the general takbirat. We're not talking about salat. We're not doing right now talking about the actual salat, but we're talking about, it's the sunnah to basically join along and just say Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar kabira, walhamdulillahi kathira, wa subhanallahi bukratan wa asila, La ilaha illallah. And then, of course, those takbirat. In Palestine, and I'm sure the same is in Syria, I'm sure the same in other places, because it is the sunnah, the men would basically be walking around the neighborhoods and actually doing those takbirat together. I absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. And certainly it would be something that would be announced, and basically the market around the masajid in the neighborhood, and even they would come out of the masjid and basically chanting that all along, even after the salah. Okay, and certainly this would be the women can participate in the dhikr, okay, but not in a loud voice, and that's what is referred to وَلِتُكْمِلُوا الْعِدَّةَ وَلِتُكَبِّرُوا اللَّهَ عَلَى مَا هَدَاكُمْ. You would complete basically the number of days that were designated, whether for تكمل العدة ولتكبر الله على ما هداكم, we're talking about Hajj, but whether it's Hajj or even the number for the days of fasting Ramadan. Okay, and certainly Eid al-Adha, التكبير basically is going to be longer than the takbir that you would do for Eid al-Fitr. Why? Because Eid al-Adha is basically the 3 days that are the first 3 days of Eid. They're called Ayyam al-Tashriq. Ayyam al-Tashriq, it is not permissible to fast during those days. Okay, it's not permissible to fast during those days. And the dhikr that you would do during those days for Salat al-Eid, Eid al-Adha, at least it would basically be for the 3 consecutive days. But for Eid al-Fitr is only 1 day, not 2 days. It's only 1 day. I know, it kind of feels bad, to be honest, because you would really want the Eid to extend even longer to feel that, yes, it's my Eid. Okay. But at the end of the day is that this is the Sunnah. We would basically connect to the Sunnah and not what we would want. Okay. So that's basically that hadith where Jabna Abdullah, that the Prophet ﷺ, whenever he would pray al-Fajr, the day of Arafah, Ghadat Arafah, meaning the second day, basically after Arafah, would basically start Allahu Akbar, basically doing those takbirat. Okay. And certainly until the very last days of Ayyam al-Tashriq. As for the person that is in a state of ihram, I don't want to go in details with that one now. Okay. I don't want to go in details with that one now, but they would basically start the takbir from Salat al-Dhuhr until basically the third day of the last day, basically, of Ayyam al-Tashriq, basically the last third day of Eid. Okay, that's for Salat, that's for al-Muhrim, basically, in Eid al-Adha. Okay, what is al-Muhrim? Al-Muhrim is basically the person that is with the intention and dressed in, for the men, dressed in the white garments, basically, the white garments doing Umrah or Hajj. Okay, that's when they would be at the miqat and then basically perform the different rites and the different rituals during Hajj or Umrah. That's basically al-Ihram. Okay, I'm just gonna skip the ones about for al-Hajj and all of that. And inshallah, let's see, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah, Allahu Akbar, and Allahu Akbar wa lillahi alhamd. That's basically the takbirat. And certainly, well, can we say things like Eid Mubarak to one another? Is that the Sunnah? The Sunnah is to actually say Taqabbalallah minna wa mink. That's the Sunnah. To say, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from us and you. That's the Sunnah. Can I say Eid Mubarak? Is that okay? It wasn't said by the Prophet ﷺ, and that's why some scholars actually considered it as a bid'ah. They considered it as a bid'ah and considered that this way of congratulating for the Eid was not done by the Prophet ﷺ, and considered that it would be a bid'ah. Other scholars, they said that no, it doesn't have to be exclusive to a particular wording, and any way of congratulating one another is permissible. Happy Eid, okay? Is that permissible? Well, according to those scholars, there's nothing wrong with it, because as long as you're basically showing that happiness, showing that congratulations to one another, and basically starting that's basically the whole intention, is to make it a day of commemoration, okay? A day of showing, I guess, that support, that union, and etc. And of course, there are some scholars that, like Imam Ahmed, said that he didn't like starting with that, starting with saying like Taqabbal ta'atukum or even Eid Mubarak or whatever, and considered that the Prophet ﷺ didn't have that habit and he didn't want to actually do it. But is it permissible? It's permissible, wallahu a'lam. Ukhtu Umayya, go ahead, dear.
الله يوفقك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Alaikum
Our
assalam.
Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how he acted during Eid. What he
So
say, how he celebrate with his family, his friend, same what we do it these days, inshallah.
same that we would do, visit people, basically, for Eid al-Adha, of course, it would be, just the whole idea of distributing the udhiyah. You're going to find yourself talking to that person because you need to give them this gift that is the sacrifice meat, and you're going to talk to that person and that person. But in general, the whole community was actually connected with one another. So just the whole idea of I need to pass on this meat and we're going to have a conversation. How are you doing? Hope everything's fine with you. How are your children doing? All of that. I think we wrongly think that those questions are not necessary, but those questions are part of the sunnah to ask about the person, their children, their health, and what they're doing, and everything, if everything's going fine with them, if they need anything, all of that is actually the sunnah. In fact, the Prophet ﷺ was even asking Jabir ibn Abdullah some personal questions, like, did you get married? Is the woman a virgin or not virgin? These kind of questions. In other words, did she have a marriage experience before? It was considered a personal question, but I guess, that at the time it wasn't considered a personal question. But, these kind of questions, just to know about one another and perhaps give a personal advice, etc., was actually common. But I would say in our culture today, specifically in American culture, many times I would say because people are living as separate individuals, I think we have exaggerated what actually is personal and what is not personal. And that's because we live so isolated. And then that probably explains one reason why I guess things like depression, anxiety is on the rise, because once you feel isolated, once you don't share and people don't really relate to you on a personal level, you're definitely going to feel that you don't matter. In order to give that treatment for depression, people have to reach out. People have to relate. But I cannot relate if you are closing the door on yourself. I won't be capable of relating if you're choosing not to share any piece of information, and every information to you is supposed to be private. I'm not going to be capable of relating this way. And then if you are always using the word introverted and that I'm introverted, don't prefer dealing with people, etc., well, then, you're choosing, and you are basically telling me that you don't want me getting closer, and therefore you are basically you're basically going to make yourself more susceptible to things like depression and anxiety and all of that. But those that are, and by the way, I would like to note this one, this whole division of introvert and extrovert and make an omnivert and whatever it is, I would say this is all new. The societies were never this way. You go to those other countries and you would see, certainly, some people may choose to deal and not deal, but we have the ability. We have a built-in capacity to deal with people. We have a built-in capacity where we can learn how to create those social skills to deal with people. And this type of division, an introvert and an extrovert and etc., and giving it this justification that, oh, I'm an introvert and I can't deal with people. Sorry, that's an imagination that you wanted to give yourself as, oh, I cannot do it. No, you can learn how to do it. It's not necessarily something that you are like that and therefore you cannot learn something new. No, you can learn. We're never born educated. You can learn how to master social skills, dealing with people, and create these relations and take away that fear. And there's no way that you can remove this fear if you're going to continue to believe that this fear is justified and it's built within you. If you are going to believe that this is what you're created with, and therefore this is not something that you can unlearn and learn a new skill, then in that situation, you're basically going to be like that forever. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had basically created the community in a community and in these relations to deal with one another. And we had seen that the communities throughout history, we were seeing that very few examples within, let's say, Medina or etc., very few cases were, let's say, very introverted, that they were isolated. But the communities that deal with one another, let's call them the normal, natural societies that basically had the children go out, learn these social skills, and come in at home and relate with their parents. They basically learned all of that and did not create these classifications or let me say the classified justifications. I'm an introvert, therefore I can't. I would say, unfortunately, especially the newer generation, they basically gave themselves these classifications in order to give themselves the justification that, oh, I'm basically this kind, therefore I cannot learn something new, which is absolutely false. Absolutely false. We can learn, we can grow, and this is basically part of our nature. This is part of your nature to relate with other people. And with Eid, with Hajj, all of that is basically part of that training to learn how to grow these skills.
So
Sorry if I hit a nail for some people that are probably comfortable with the classification. I'm an introvert, so please don't step on my toes, and I'm happier this way, and etc. I would say, well, the sunnah is to relate with people because it's going to be better for your mental health. It's going to be better for your social skills. It's going to be better for your education. You don't necessarily, we definitely vary in how social we are, but to completely be isolated and say that I'm an introvert is definitely not the sunnah. Definitely not the sunnah, and definitely not our nature. I'd love to hear what other people think of this.
So the Prophet ﷺ, after he finished Salatul Eid, how he make the tahni'ah between him and the Sahaba?
There wasn't anything specific that he was saying. There
Nothing.
wasn't Eid Mubarak. There was no taqabbal ta'atakum. There wasn't anything specific that he was congratulating or words that he was congratulating one another. That was not there. It was just, randomly meeting people, asking about how they were and all of that, but there wasn't a specific wording of congratulations.
So what we do it these days, it's like not sunnah.
Well,
Social words.
to the first opinion, yes. I would say, the Ahl al-Hadith / Salafi, they would consider that a bid'ah. But to the other scholars, they said, well, congratulating one another, it was really more of a cultural thing, and therefore using things like Eid Mubarak, taqabbal ta'atakum, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it from you, or things like that, that's permissible. So I wouldn't classify it as a bid'ah per se, but I would just say the Prophet ﷺ didn't use a specific term.
But it's too much in our days that you receive tens of videos and songs and about tahni'ah, and you feel yourself you are so loaded to answer everyone. You feel it like, خلاص, it's wajib. صح؟
Well, I mean, it's a way, I guess it's a modern way to tell you I remembered you, to tell you I'm reaching out. I would really recommend that you would actually do, if it's a phone call, get to know the situation, give that support. I personally think and feel that sometimes, forwarding, I don't know, a little, emoji or whatever it is, I would say, it's, I don't know, well, thank you, but I don't think it really does the job to connect and reach out to people. It's better than nothing, but I would really recommend, hey, if you could use some time to reach out to people and actually ask about them and create this conversation. I think one main therapy that we had really missed out on is really that communication that we would do with one another. That communication we would do with one another, that in itself is therapy. To ask you about your studies, your plans, and what's happening, the pains, all of that. That's basically to help create that relationship. It's to make me feel important, to make me feel that someone cares. And you also making other people feel that you care. That's creating that community. I mean, sir, sending a sticker or, emoji or forwarding that to me, well, thank you, that's nice, but it depends on the person. Sending it to perhaps maybe your mother, that's man. You should be calling your mother to send her a stickers. Okay, I done my job, because my mom is so hard to talk to. It's so common that younger generation or children would basically think my mom is so hard to talk to. Remember what that day when you did not communicate at all, but your mom would be the one to communicate with you regardless? For God's sake, talk to your mother. Call your mother. Be patient when your mother is perhaps maybe, not capable of communicating well. Maybe she lost gray matter in her brains and she's not focused as she used to. Maybe she, that gray matter in her brain and is making her sometimes, hard to understand, and she's just not focused, etc. And maybe she's going through, I don't know, perimenopause or maybe menopause, or probably even older, and maybe, I don't know, Alzheimer's, whatever it is. Be patient with your mother. Be patient with your father. They were patient when you were young and you didn't communicate. You didn't even learn how to speak. But they were so patient, and she knew just by your hand gestures on what you really wanted. Isn't it time that you would pay back and actually be there for your mother? Allahul Musta'an. It's quite sad how, the society had been so much lacking discipline in terms of giving respect to their parents and how to embrace them and embrace those that had contributed so much in our life. Allahul Musta'an.
So greeting is a culture, is a social things. It's not sunnah.
Right, it's a social thing.
Like make a Christmas, happy Thanksgiving, like this.
Yeah, well, Christmas is different because that's a religious one.
Yeah.
But we're talking about Eid. Okay.
Yeah, but it's
that's
culture.
a cultural thing.
I mean culture, as we hear it from the American, we hear it from us.
Right.
Jazakallah.
Yeah. So inshallah, if there are any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And if not, we will see you all tomorrow, inshallah. Well, the day after tomorrow. Hopefully, maybe I can do it to see it tomorrow, but inshallah. Oh yeah, my son wants me to pick him up tomorrow. Okay, maybe I can't do it to see it tomorrow.
We need day break.